I'm Ryan from ExtremeTerrain.com, and in this video we're going to be talking about the different types of lift kits available for your Wrangler. Today we're going to talk about leveling kits, coil spring spacer lift kits, coil spring lift kits, and what I'm going to call full or more complete coil spring lift kits. Those are going to include a bunch of components that the other lift kits that we're going to talk about did not include. Make sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel. That way you can check out some detailed videos about all of the different products we're going to be talking about today, as well as take a look at all the different lift kits that are available on the site for your Jeep. So the different categories that we're going to talk about today are really going to span all generations. So whether you have a YJ, TJ, JK, or even the new JL, this is going to be pretty consistent across all of them. We're going to talk about some of the pros and cons of the different types of lift kits that are available. So that first category of lift kit that we're going to talk about is a leveling kit. And this is going to be a coil spring spacer. So it's going to be something that just goes on top of your factory coil spring. And the idea here is that it brings the front of the Jeep up a little bit. It's just going to level out the factory rake of the Jeep. The benefit is that the Jeep is going to look a little bit better in a lot of people's opinion. A lot of people don't like that factory rake. And another big benefit is that it's going to be very inexpensive, because it is just a couple of spacers, usually polyurethane, sometimes metal. They're going to be very inexpensive, fairly easy to install. You don't need a ton of components, and it's not really going to change a lot about how the Jeep drives, because again, it's just a little bit of a spacer. Now, some of these leveling kits will include a spacer for just the front. Most of them will give you a little bit more lift in the front than in the back, but they will give you just a tiny bit of lift all the way around. But again, not enough to need a bunch of other components on your Jeep. So not a huge improvement in performance, but it is going to improve the look of your Jeep. The next category that we're going to talk about is a coil spring spacer lift kit, and this is usually going to include coil spring spacers and also a set of shocks or maybe shock extensions. So the idea here, and the big difference between a leveling kit and a coil spring spacer lift kit, is that the lift kit that we're talking about now is designed to provide lift for a bigger set of tires. Again, the level is just more of an aesthetic thing. The coil spring spacer lift kit is providing lift so you can fit a bigger tire under your Jeep, have more articulation, and therefore have some more off-road capability. Now, a coil spring spacer is going to still be a fairly inexpensive way of lifting your Jeep. It is going to be less expensive than some of the kits we're going to talk about in just a second here, but there are a couple of minor drawbacks to one of these kits versus the more expensive options. So when you are adding a coil spring spacer lift kit to the Jeep, you can end up in a condition called coil bind. That's where you have your coil springs completely compressed, where the coils are actually touching each other. That will happen a little bit sooner than it would with one of the coil spring lift kits that we're going to talk about in just a second. So that is something to keep in mind. But overall, if you are looking for a less expensive option to be able to fit a bigger tire under your Jeep, a coil spring spacer lift kit is going to be a very nice choice. The next option that we're going to talk about is the coil spring lift kit. This is going to provide you with taller coil springs in order to accomplish the same thing as that coil spring spacer kit. So again, we're talking about creating more space, a taller ride height for a bigger set of tires, and getting more off-road performance. These kits are also going to include shocks or shock extensions, because you are going to need that for that new taller ride height. And the benefit to coil springs over coil spring spacers is that you're not going to have as much of an issue going into coil bind as you would with the spacer kit that we just talked about. The coil springs that you'll get in a kit like this can also have a stiffer spring rate. So if you're putting things like armor, bumpers, winches, big spare tires and tire carriers on your Jeep, that little bit of a stiffer spring rate can help to hold up to that additional weight. And again, the coil spring spacer kit that we just talked about, while it is less expensive, is not going to provide you with that. The last category that we're going to talk about, the full or more complete coil spring lift kit, that's where you get all of those other components. So this is going to include coil springs, shocks, control arms, either 4 or 8, usually a track bar brackets. These are going to be pieces that you're going to want to have included in your lift kit if you're looking for something that is going to perform drastically better than your factory Jeep would have off of the assembly line floor, and also something that's going to correct any sort of issue that can come in by lifting your Jeep. So as you lift the Jeep, you change a couple of different geometry factors. You're going to change how the Jeep rides, how it performs, and in some cases, how well components hold up over the long term. So by adding things like track bars and control arms, you can fix pinion angle and caster angle, and you can really dial the Jeep in, make sure it's going to perform very, very well on the road and also very well off the road. And of course, as with all the lift kits that we talked about, you're gonna be able to fit a much bigger tire underneath the Jeep. Now, the only downside, if you want to call it that, to a more complete or a full coil spring lift kit is going to be the price. Once you start including 4 or 8 control arms, different track bars, a bunch of different brackets and hardware to make everything work really well, the price can certainly go up. But if you are looking for the performance, that's going to be the way to go. So today we did talk about a leveling kit, we talked about the coil spring spacer lift kit, a coil spring lift kit, and a much more complete or full spring lift kit for your Jeep. They're all going to have pros and cons, and hopefully this video helped you make a decision on which type of lift kit is going to be best for you, your Wrangler, and how you plan to use it. Make sure you comment below, let me know if you have any questions, and let me know what type of lift you're running on your Jeep currently, or what type you'd like to install on your Jeep. So do make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, that way you can check out those detailed product videos on all the different types of lift kits that we offer.